Today we're going to talk about bugs. To start with, I'm going to ask you a question. How many bugs do you think there were filed in Dragon Age Inquisition? Why don't you go down in the comments and put your guess. I'll wait while you do that. Okay, so all your guesses are in there. There were over 99,000 bugs filed on Dragon Age Inquisition before it shipped. Including all the DLC and post-release content, it was well above 100,000 bugs. Some of you might have gotten close to that number, but I suspect a lot of you had a number that was significantly smaller than 100,000. Dragon Age Inquisition had more bugs than you might see on some other kinds of games, but even still, most AAA titles are going to have tens of thousands of bugs filed on them. So let's talk about where some of these bugs come from. I don't mean where the actual errors come from, I mean what is the source of these filed bugs. Obviously, you have a QA or QV department. Their primary purpose is to verify the quality of your title, and a lot of that is done through testing the game. In addition to your QA department, you also want to encourage your developers to be filing bugs. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. One, you want to be encouraging your developers to play the game they are building because that's how they understand the game better as a whole. That's how they understand where their system plugs in, but also they understand their particular systems to a depth that nobody else does. If they're a writer, they know how this plot is supposed to go, and if an entire branch is failing to fire, they're the ones most likely to find it. If they're a combat designer, they know how the combat is supposed to work. This particular move is supposed to work, and they're the ones that can understand the problems. Sometimes better even than the QA department does. Now, sometimes bugs filed by your devs are going to be terribly formatted because they are not trained to do this. But even still, you want to encourage bugs from this group as well. In the case of a Bioware title, usually around 30 to 40% of the bugs on a project come from the devs. There are lots of different ways to divide up bug types. You can divide up between white box or black box testing, or by priority, or by source. But what I'm going to talk about right now is qualitative versus quantitative bugs. Quantitative bugs are bugs that are a direct objective fault. Whether this be something failing a test plan or a crash, there is no question that this is a bug because you can point directly to the fault, and either there is documentation that shows that it's a bug, or the game is crashing, so it's obviously a bug. Test plan testing, which generates a lot of your quantitative bugs, can be quite mechanical. And it's one of the places that more and more you're starting to see automated testing. Whether it be check-in tests or bots or what have you, this kind of well-articulated test plan is an excellent place to put some automation in place. And this is another source of your bugs. So as you have bots that are automatically filing bugs for every assert or every crash, you now have another place where bugs are coming from outside of your QV department. Though that being said, if you have a well-empowered and experienced QV department, they can actually be the source of a lot of your automation as they build test plans and they build bots and they build the automation that runs these test plans. Qualitative bugs are something different. These are cases where the game doesn't feel right. They're opinions. They are open for discussion or argument. Some projects do not allow qualitative bugs to be filed by their QA department, and I think that's a huge mistake. While you're in development, your QA department is the closest thing you have that represents a player. So if they are feeling that something isn't quite right, you want to hear that. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to fix it, but it's worth filing even so. In my experience, most of your bugs are coming from chaos testing. This is where your QA or QB is playing the game and finding faults. Now, a lot of people in QA have a almost pathological need to play a game in non-standard ways, running along wall edges or hopping around or looking for other other odd ways to play games. And when you watch these people play games not on the clock, they play the games in the same way. You want people like that. You want people that are going to play the game in non-standard ways. I've said in the past that if I was in QA, I wouldn't be very good at it because I'm pretty sure you could take the collision off the walls in most of the games I play, and I would never discover that fact because I do have a tendency to stay in the desired lane and as a result test the most tested parts of the game. Test plan testing is really looking for faults. It's looking for cases where you have a very specific desired way that a system works and the test is looking for deviations from that. Chaos testing is looking for those things as well, but because it's not following as strict of a plan, or possibly not following a plan at all, it's also looking for something else. It's looking for cases where the experience deviates from expectations. I think the reason why chaos testing has been the source of most of the bugs on the projects I've worked with is twofold. First, if you can write a test plan for something, then chances are you can also build the system in a way that never fails that test plan, or at least build it robustly enough that it doesn't fail it very often. So chaos testing is finding the quantitative bugs, the faults, in places where you weren't able to build a test plan. But the main reason, the primary reason why chaos testing is such a source of bugs is because it's the place that you get these failures of expectation, these qualitative bugs. A general theme of this video is going to be this. Wherever possible, you want to give everyone on your team incentive to file every bug or fault that they see. Not just QA, not just the quantitative bugs, not just the major things, everything. And you don't want to discourage filing because things aren't done. You don't want to discourage filing because it's outside someone's area of responsibility. Does this lead to duplicate bugs? It absolutely does. But the alternative is that you disallow or discourage filing of certain kinds of bugs. And what happens if you do that, you can get something called bug blindness. Bug blindness is where your player or tester stops seeing a particular kind of bug because they've been encountering it for so long and they haven't been filing bugs against it that now they essentially are used to it. They no longer see it. You really want to avoid bug blindness if at all possible. One way to combat bug blindness is to bring in fresh eyes throughout your testing process, to bring in new people that don't have that blindness. On duplicate bugs, it is reasonable to expect someone filing a bug to do at least some degree of check against the database to see if something else is filed. And for the QA department, you can increase this expectation somewhat over your devs, because with devs, you're always fighting against their natural instinct not to file bugs. But what you have to be careful of is to not make that expectation high enough that people stop filing bugs that they just assume must have been filed by someone else. Every project I've ever been on has had some major bug that went unfiled for longer than it should have because everyone just assumed that someone else had filed it. This is the case of a man dying of a heart attack in a room full of doctors. Encourage people to file the bug, even though it will result in more duplicates. You can always clean that up in triage because you are doing triage. Right? There is a, let's say, philosophical disagreement between how you file faults that are common but across many different things. I kind of sit not in the middle, but towards one end of this discussion. So if you have someone filing the fact that items are missing descriptions, there are two ways to file these bugs. You can file a master bug where every single item is loaded into a single bug, and then that is the bug that is responsible for fixing all of those faults. Or you can file an individual bug for each and every missing description. I prefer the latter because it's easier to manage, because as you fix each individual fault, you can resolve each individual bug on its own. And in some cases, it might turn out that what you thought were similar bugs that you grouped together in a master bug were actually different things. And if you have a master bug, now what do? This thing is just a mess of being filed and passed around and things are being crossed off and it's mutating and changing. For me, I prefer one bug per fault, even if the faults are very similar. This isn't a hard and fast rule. There are cases where maybe, yes, you do want to just have one single bug for a whole bunch of identical faults. But as a general rule, I think you should file one bug, one fault, not transform bugs into different bugs because you've got a bunch of different things grouped together. In my experience, way more often are you breaking a master bug apart into its component faults than wishing you had grouped together a bunch of individual bugs because they're very similar. Another question is, what do you do if the cause of one bug is actually a different bug? Ideally, your bug tracking software should allow you to link bugs together. So my preference in this case is to create a new bug on the new problem and link it to the original bug. Why? Because in this case, chances are that the new bug is going to go to a different person. Maybe the bug was a problem with the color saturation on a material, but there's actually an issue with the material editor that needs to be fixed by an engineer. So you have two bugs here. You have the material editor, and then you have the fact that the material is set up wrong. My preference in this case is to file a new bug about the material editor, keep the original bug on the person who's going to fix that, and link the two bugs together. It does mean that that first bug is in a block state. It cannot be worked on until the material editor problem is resolved. But I do think it gives you better understanding of the state of your project and a better understanding of where things are. Now, that doesn't mean you should never pass around bugs. Some bugs are going to require several different people to work on them in serial, in which case, yes, you probably shouldn't resolve and refile a bunch of bugs. You should just take that original bug and pass it from person to person until it is fixed. Additionally, sometimes bugs are just going to be misfiled and you just need to get them onto the right person. You should be on the lookout for bugs that are ping-ponging around. This can happen for bugs that people are having difficulty figuring out where to start, and they can just push it from department to department, from dev to dev, essentially just leaving it in this state of never completely getting off the ground. But again, this is the kind of thing that you can catch in triage as you look at bugs that are changing owner often or getting really old. One of the consequences of having everything filed, of avoiding master bugs, of creating new bugs for causal issues off of original bugs, is that you can end up in a situation where your devs have a lot of bugs. A temptation is to pull them off of the dev and create holding imaginary devs, if you will, where the bugs for combat sit on a combat bug holder. The thinking here is to try to avoid overwhelming any one dev with too many bugs. I think that motivation is a good one, but I think you have to be incredibly careful here. I personally don't like holding people, like places where bugs just go to hide, because I think too often it's a place where bugs just go to die. But it can be useful. If you're doing this, however, you need your devs to be looking at this other list because you want them to be looking for opportunities to fix several bugs at the same time. If they only have 2 bugs and there are another 20 or 30 bugs sitting on a holding person, they lose the ability to get these efficiencies. They lose the ability to see patterns in the errors of the game. So personally, I don't like holding places for bugs, but if you are going to use them, look for ways to avoid overprotecting your devs from the bugs on the project, because doing so removes a tool from their toolbox, which would allow them to be more efficient, more effective, and find the root causes of more bugs, as opposed to just patching symptom after symptom. I feel like I've tried too hard to be objective in this section, so let me take one more swing at it. I hate bug holders. I think that they are a good way to hide things, both from the devs and from your part of the project. I think that they make devs less effective at fixing bugs. I think they cause bugs to take longer to get fixed. I think they prevent people from seeing patterns in bugs being filed. I don't like them. They've existed on projects that I've led, but the people that have used them have had to fight with me every step of the way to allow them to continue to exist. So maybe that's the state they should be allowed to exist in this back-footed way where they're having to justify their existence every step of the way. I don't like them. If you do, be prepared to fight for them. You should be encouraging your devs to be aware of their bug list. If you're filing everything, you're going to end up at places in your project where people are going to have quite a few bugs. Some of very high urgency and priority, some of very low urgency and priority. Ideally, those devs are able to look for opportunities to pick some bugs off their list, even though they might be of lower priority. This can be difficult for people to do because people want to go through the list in order. And in some cases, your project management people will be discouraging this kind of behavior so strongly that it won't happen. If that's the case, you should definitely look for opportunities to force this kind of quick bug fixing. Maybe you just spend a week trying to fix as many bugs on the project as possible. This is something that I've had to do because a lot of devs, especially less experienced ones, have a lot of difficulty reprioritizing or looking for opportunities to make those quick wins. They become trapped by the list priority that they have. But this is also a reason why I think you want devs to have a fairly complete list of bugs, because if they have 20 bugs on their list, that's 20 opportunities for potentially a quick fix. If you've hidden 18 bugs from them, they can't find those quick opportunities because those easy wins are hiding on someone else's list where they can't see them necessarily. If you're encouraging the filing of qualitative bugs, and you should, you will have to have some method of saying that this really isn't a bug or this works as it's designed. And this is where triage has another purpose. You need to have several different ways to close out bugs. Obviously, most of your bugs are going to be fixed. Around 10% are going to be bugs that you are deciding not to fix, possibly because they're so minor, possibly because time has run out. This is a will not fix or known shippable state. Some of your bugs are going to be duplicates. Because you're encouraging people to file everything that they see, you want them to put in a minimal effort at least to look for duplicates, but things are going to slip through the cracks. Another up to 10% of your bugs are going to be duplicates, and you're going to resolve it as a duplicate, ideally by referencing the original bug that it's duplicated off of, because sometimes a bug you think is a duplicate actually isn't, and actually is a new thing. You're going to have some bugs that you're going to resolve as works as design or not a bug, because this is working as intended and there is a misinterpretation of how it's supposed to work, or the design is changed, or for whatever reason the person isn't understanding how it's supposed to work. You do have to pause here and think, well, then why was this bug filed in the first place? If it was filed because a test plan needed to be updated, then you better go update that test plan. If it was filed because they didn't understand what was going on, then you may have a different problem, which is this system isn't clear and your player is going to be confused by this as well. Similar to the works as design are bugs that no longer apply. You might just group these in with works as designed, but this would be for bugs in areas where the design has changed out from underneath the bug, or from something where the piece of content has been cut. And then the final state that a bug can end up being resolved into is a cannot reproduce. This is a bug which was filed, but the person it was filed to can't reproduce it. Often this is because the bug got fixed out from underneath them, but sometimes it can be because the bug doesn't have adequate reproduction steps. You have to be careful with the cannot reproduce state, because some devs, if they're feeling overwhelmed by their bug list, can spend minimal time trying to reproduce a bug, bounce it back into this state, and and you can end up in this sort of ping-ponging state of bugs going back and forth between a QA person and the dev that's going to fix it. In Triage, look for bugs that are bouncing back and forth from this state. If you have bugs being filed on your project early and you're allowing everything to be filed, which you should, then you can get into states where it's a good idea to get the bug list to be essentially retested. Bugs that have been sitting on the list for several months potentially are no longer valid, and it's worthwhile having them retested to ensure that they still are valid. Even though this seems like doubled up work, it actually does give the tester a starting point from which to retest something. So this is a potential use for that cannot reproduce, that CNR state, because you can resolve really old bugs into that state to get a reproduction test done. It's not necessary, but it can be done that way. Behind all of these non-standard bug resolutions, you need to have an expectation that you've empowered your QV department to push back if you've done this kind of resolution in error. If you've marked a bug as will not fix, you should allow and expect the QA person to push back on that if they feel that the severity is worse than maybe coming across in the bug. And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes the bug doesn't fully reflect how bad a bug truly is. This also applies for works as design. They may feel that this design is poor, and that's actually does happen. You do see this in Triage, where bugs get resolved as works as design, and then you see it in Triage. You basically reopen the bug and with a comment that is essentially something to the effect of works as design, but design is bad. So make sure that you have empowered your QB department to push back on you when you are resolving bugs, because otherwise you can ship things that you shouldn't simply because the bug gets closed when it shouldn't have been. Now, you aren't going to always listen to this pushback, but you still want this door to stay open. Okay, let's summarize this. A strong, empowered QV department is going to be the source of most of your bugs, but you still want to encourage bugs from your devs because they can give you a different kind of bug and can make up a significant percentage of your bug database. Where possible, automate your quantitative testing to free up your QV testers for more chaos testing. Chaos testing is going to give you a large percentage of your bugs. Maybe not most of them, but maybe. File everything and be wary of blackouts on certain kinds of bugs because it can lead to bug blindness. Be wary of collection bugs because they can cause very complicated workflows. Instead, consider filing one bug per fault. When you run into bugs that have precursor bugs, in most cases, the best thing to do is to file a new bug for the precursor bug and to keep the original bug where it was. Don't use imaginary people in your bug software to hide bugs from the rest of the project. Instead, empower your devs to manage and control their own bug lists. You're going to need different resolution states beyond simply fixed because you're going to want to close bugs for different reasons than simply fixing them. And empower your QV department to push back on you. Empower all your devs to push back on you because this will lead to a better state of your bug database, a better quality of bug, and ultimately a better quality of project. Hopefully this was illuminating in terms of all of the bugs on a project. If you found this useful, please hit that like button. Share this with other people you think might find some value. I will see you again soon. Thank you.